Hello and welcome to episode 272 of the Epic Film Challenge to 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die from 1945. I believe it may be 1944, but I'm pretty sure it's 1945. We have The Lost Weekend, starring Ray Milland and Jane Wyman and directed by Billy Wilder, who is, of course, one of those towering names of Hollywood from back in that period of the 40s and 50s and had a very prolific career. And I've seen a few of his films. There's so many more that I could see, and The Apartment is one of my very favorites, but there's definitely some big heavy hitters I still haven't got to. The Lost Weekend is one of his kind of murkier, noirish kind of efforts, and I had seen it before, and I rewatched it again for this, and it's an interesting one, The Lost Weekend, and that's interesting. You know what's really interesting is when I don't know what to say, I'll say something like, it's an interesting thing, and it's really me stalling. I'm buying for time, and it's not that I don't have anything to say about this film, so I really don't know where to start, and I don't plan these videos out particularly, so we're kind of flying loose here with The Lost Weekend, but where do you start? I mean, it's a very simple setup. It's a movie about an alcoholic, a man called Don Burnham, played by Ray Milland, who won the Academy Award for Best Actor for this performance. And the film itself was a huge critical success. It won the Academy Award for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay. It was based on a novel by a guy called Charles Jackson, who had a very interesting life. And it's a kind of semi-autobiographical book about his struggles with alcoholism, and he overcame it and wrote a book about it, and would subsequently continue to struggle with alcoholism throughout. I'm not sure if it was his whole life, but he certainly continued to struggle with it, and he also struggled with his own sexuality, which is kind of in the book, that the character of Don Burnham is kind of a closet homosexual. But, this is the 40s, and, as far as the movie version was concerned, that was completely dispensed with. And I'm not even sure if it was one of those things where the undertones were, really under. I don't know the specifics or anything, but I would imagine that it wasn't quite overt. But Charles Jackson was the guy who wrote the original book. It was then adapted by Billy Wilder and Charles Brackett into the film. And the film was kind of something that the alcohol industry was very worried about. They were concerned about this movie being put out there. They thought this is going to usher in a new era of prohibition, and there was some spurious rumor that some gangster had offered $5 million to Paramount to destroy the print. And I think Billy Wilder had quipped that if he'd given me $5 million, I would have burned the print myself, which was more of a joke, I suppose, of, hey, I'll take $5 million. But, so this was a film that was very much tackling the alcoholic in a really no-holds-barred fashion, at least for the time. You look at it now, it may feel a little bit tame when we follow this character of Don Burnham and his struggle with kicking the habit and turning away from drink, because there have definitely been films in recent years that deal with addiction. You think of something like maybe Requiem for a Dream, which goes all in on that. But there's been plenty of other ones that have dealt with alcoholism. Clean and Sober is a great one of my all-time favorites. Not that I have a list of all-time favorite alcoholism and drug addiction movies, but it's one of my all-time favorite films. Michael Keaton gives one of his best performances in that. But it is a compelling thing to see someone go through that kind of dark night of the soul in trying to conquer their addictions. And addiction is a really interesting thing. And I'm going to go way off on a tangent here, but I was listening to the audiobook by Kirsten Johnston, who played Sally in Third Rock from the Sun. She released a memoir called Guts, which is phenomenal. I listened to the audiobook version, and it was just absolutely fantastic. In the beginning of that book, and I'm hugely paraphrasing here, but she said something to the effect of, I dedicate this book to all the addicts out there, which is every single one of you. And she just lists off all these things that people can be addicted to. It isn't just drugs. It isn't just alcohol. It's so many things that the human being and psyche can latch onto and be addicted to. For me, sugar, like that's absolutely no doubt, no question, you know, crisp, chocolate, pop, all that stuff. That's why my weight wildly fluctuates throughout the years on my channel. Sometimes I'm a little bit thinner, sometimes I'm a bit heavier, sometimes I'm really fat, as I am right now. It just, you know, it fluctuates because of my addiction to sugary stuff. And that's something that, you know, is a problem. For me, it's a health problem. But I'm lucky that I don't have something that is, you know, really impairing, like an alcohol addiction, and I've never really experienced anything like that. And there are moments in this film where, and I hate to say it, I really do, because it would sound really crass or classless to say it, but there was almost moments when watching The Lost Weekend where I thought, man, I'd kind of like to know what that feels like. You know, we see Don just like absolutely obsessed with getting his next drink, and there's a scene where he runs into a bar and he's just absolutely distraught, and he says to the bartender, Nat, just give me one shot of whiskey, just one, please. And Nat, who's played by Howard Da Silva and is, you know, a really good character, and one of the highlights of the film for me is his kind of wry observations of Don and his issues. But I really enjoyed his character in the film, but he says something to the effect of, you know, one's not enough, or 100. No, 100's not enough, and one isn't. I forgot the phrase. Leave that in for free. It's a funny turn of phrase where, you know, it's like basically insinuating, yeah, you want one now, then it's another, then it's another, and then, you know, you just keep going and going and going, basically. But and it's a great little phrase. So watch the film to get that neat little phrase that Nat the bartender had. But, you know, and he relents and gives him this one shot, and he just brings it up to his lips, and it's and he brings it, and it just, the relief, you know, although it then kind of rolls over into, you know, just wanting more, it almost made me feel like, man, I wonder what that's like. And I kind of know what that's like. You know, say I'm in the house and it's about that time where all the shops shut, and I know that maybe I don't have anything fizzy in the house. And it's not even necessarily wanting maybe sugar, but just the fix of carbonation, I guess. And if I haven't got anything and I know that I can't get to a shop, there's like a thing inside me, but it would never drive me to do anything rash. Obviously, with alcohol, it changes your mindset, and it's a very easy thing to get lost in. When if you have problems, you can just wash it all away with alcohol, and it kind of affects you physically, it affects your health, it affects you mentally, and you know, long term it can really mess up your relationships. And this film dives into that in many ways, you know. And the beginning of the film is a really a beautiful way to kind of it's not beautiful, but it's like it's so well done in the way that it sets up the story right from the opening beat. We have New York City. The camera pans along, we just see an open window, and we zoom in on the open window, and dangling out of the window is a bottle on a string outside a bedroom. And we see the character of Don and his brother. They're getting ready to go away for a weekend, and they reference the fact that he's been off alcohol for about 10 days or so. And we know, the audience, that bottle's outside the window. So we assume that Don knows that bottle's outside the window. And he's just trying anything he can to basically get his brother and this woman played by, is it Jane? Yeah, Jane Wyman, who plays Helen. Helen is kind of a, you know, on and off romance with Don, and she's there kind of, you know, to see them off. And he's kind of, you just see you can see in kind of Don's mannerisms, in what he's saying, the manipulation that he's kind of trying to get them to go out. Oh, we'll take a later train for the weekend. You two go out. And we know that he's doing that because he wants to get that bottle of whiskey that's hanging out the window. And there's a moment where he tries to pull it out, but the string is still caught on, so he drops it back down again. And there's a tension to that scene right from the beginning. And we see, you know, our first introduction to Don is that he's just bold-faced lying to the people who love him the most. And he just wants to get that bottle of whiskey. And then, you know, from there, we basically follow him over a long weekend, the Lost Weekend, where he just completely spirals. His brother kind of washes his hands of him. So I'm leaving. You know, how many times have we tried to help him? And he goes off for the weekend, and Don basically just goes on a bit of a bender, and he doesn't really have much money. He resorts to stealing. You know, he resorts to all these things, and we just see varying varying levels of him just really going down into well, I mean, you know, again, you could probably make it even grittier. You know, it's at the end of the day, he is always dressed in a suit. You know, he isn't homeless. You know, there are certainly ways to go even harder on like showing how alcohol can affect people, especially long term. And this is more of a short term thing of just showing how explosive his relationship with alcohol is, and his kind of penchant for it, and how much he romanticizes it as well. There's a few scenes in the bar where he's kind of just going on this little soliloquy to Nat, the bartender, about how great alcohol is and how it just you know, it just brings everything out and all this, and it's just this wondrous thing to him. And there's a really nice kind of showing the passage of time, and also showing how much he's drinking when he shouldn't be. When I'll just get one shot. He puts the shot down, and then Nat takes the kind of the shot glass away and is about to wipe the bar down. And Don is like, no, don't do it. I like these little rings. They kind of, you know, and then we kind of transition, and suddenly all these little rings of kind of leftover whiskey have now formed a little pattern on the bar, and then that shows us, okay, he's drinking a lot now, and he's kind of doing what he said he wouldn't do. And we go into flashback then, and we see when he first meets Helen, this kind of frustrating sequence that felt a little bit out of a silent comedy almost, where his jacket got mixed up with a woman at an opera house, and he had a bottle of whiskey in the jacket. And as he waits for the person whose coat he's got to come back, and he's all like annoyed about it and stuff, but then he sees it's this beautiful woman, and they get talking, and there's a bit of chemistry there. And as she's saying goodbye, he kind of pulls his jacket out without thinking, and the bottle of whiskey falls on the floor and smashes. And the music plays it up in this kind of dramatic thing, and he looks like, but he very quickly smooths it over, like, oh, a friend of mine is sick, I thought I'd go and take him something strong, you know, a stiff drink and everything. But it shows you the seeds, and then we just see through flashbacks how Helen, you know, really falls for this guy. And even though she kind of grows to know about his problems, she wants to help him. And she really is such a positive character in that sense. She really wants to stand by him and help him, but he doesn't want the help. And he kind of shuns it and kind of resigns himself to his own fate, and is very much of the mindset of, look, it's, you know, there's me, the drunk, and then there's me, the writer. And that's another part of the story, is that he's trying to be a writer, he's trying to write a novel, but he just can't get past that title. And then he decides he's going to write about alcoholism, the bottle, but that's all he can get as far as is the title. And you know, he goes on his journey, and so we kind of mix the flashback with this weekend, this focused period of time. And actually, one thing I wanted to add in here was just some of the dialogue in this film is so great. And I mentioned the sequence with kind of the ringlets of whiskey, and one of the lines from Don is, "Don't wipe it away, Nat. Let me have my little vicious circle. You know, the circle is a perfect geometric figure. No end, no beginning." Now, one of the really cool things about the film, I think, when you think about it, is that you know, Don Burnham goes off on these big kind of monologues, and they're very kind of writerly. But that is kind of the irony of the film, is that shows that he clearly is very poetic in the way he's able to express himself, and that he probably would be a very good writer. But the fact that he doesn't pursue that is kind of the kind of tragic, you know, part of the film. And the part that I was talking about earlier, when he's like begging for the one shot, Nat. I got that line up too, and Nat says, "One's too many and 100's not enough." So there you go. That was the line that I forgot how to remember. Forgot how to remember. That's not really an accurate sentence, is it? But you catch my drift. And one more line I just wanted to kind of I really like this. Some of the dialogue is just brilliant. "Love is the hardest thing in the world to write about. It's so simple. You've got to catch it through the details, like the early morning sunlight hitting the grey tin of the rain spout in front of her house." And that's just me delivering it in a very droll, monotone voice, like I tend to do. But he's like just rattling off of his tongue in that beautiful kind of 40s cadence, you know. So I think the dialogue in this film is just fantastic. So I just wanted to kind of give that a reference in the video. One thing I really liked about the film, and I could tell instantly, was that they actually shot in New York. Clearly a lot of it was done on sets and probably in Hollywood somewhere, but I did read that Billy Wilder wanted to get at least some footage shot in New York, and there's a couple of little tiny beats where it's like, oh, that was definitely... And it's really cool. Like, I think he walks up one of those, like... the kind of the overpass, or like the train that kind of goes on the track above the street, and he kind of goes up the steps. I guess it's a subway train, really. It's like an overground subway, and the camera pans around. You just see like this this vista of the New York City kind of skyline from the 1940s. I just love seeing those little time capsules in movies, you know, and you can very clearly tell it's not like a backdrop or something. I read that this film, I don't know if it invented or pioneered or made popular the kind of the trope of a character kind of walking, you know, lost in their kind of, you know, whatever they're going through and stuff. They're going through a bad period and they're just kind of walking down the street, and it's the, you know, the actors kind of moving like this, but it's a rear projection shot of a, you know, they must have filmed that in New York and they just threw him on a stage to kind of do what would now be done in blue screen. And it's kind of, but I don't know. I mean, well, now that I think about it, yeah, I can think of a few instances of it, but it's not before the 1940s. But yes, so and visually as well, the way this film is shot is very nice. It's not like film noir, like 101, like deep cuts, like, you know, beautiful, like, you know, harsh lighting and like really moody. I mean, there is a lot of moody stuff and great, you know, shots and things. But as far as like this kind of story goes, it's really, you know, black and white, you know, it has something, and this kind of story really benefits from black and white. I don't know why. I'm no critic. I'm now thinking I want to try to be a critic, by the way. At this point in time, I'm thinking about trying to write about film, but, you know, still, I can't identify why black and white works so well with these kinds of dark stories. I guess maybe it is as simple as just the shadows of it all, and these shadowy stories. And I think the performance of Ray Milland as Don Burnham, it's really good. But there's a few moments where it gets a bit much. There's a sequence in which he's lying in the, kind of like just slumped in his chair in his living room, and he sees a vision of a mouse crawling through a hole in the wall, and then a bat comes in. And this bat is very clearly like dangling on wires and stuff. And he's screaming, and he's so committed to the screaming that it kind of tramples all over the scene a little bit. And then the bat kind of hones in on the mouse, and then blood starts pouring out of the wall. It's a pretty like fucking metal sequence, but, you know, it kind of gets I don't know, it's almost like if that scene is a balloon, then you get a couple of pinpricks in it with his kind of over-the-top reaction and the fact that the bat is like a very flimsy, you know, puppet on strings. But you know, Helen comes in, and then he sees there's no hole, there's no blood, there's no bat, and he's just going crazy. And there are these, you know, nicely done moments where you see him pushed to the brink and then gets pulled back, and then you see, well, what does he do now? You know, because it's one thing to see someone just continually get beat down and beat down and beat down. What do they do when they're given a chance? And he often pushes it away. And these excuses start rattling out of him. And to be completely honest, there are so many things in the way he was making excuses and kind of making these little lies up that then grew into bigger lies. I completely identify with myself, to be brutally honest, especially when I was like a teenager and stuff. I lied a lot, and I would just get caught up in my own lies, and there would just be so many, and it would almost be for nothing, you know. It's almost like a compulsive thing. But yeah, so that was something I was kind of like, oh, like... And I started wondering if I was an alcoholic, would this be the kind of person, you know, that I'd be like? And, you know, seeing that desperation, and it is really, you know, again, I'm assuming for around this time in the 1940s, it was an ad. But then you did have the rise of these kinds of films, these kind of darker film noir, you know, movies. So maybe it isn't so out of the ordinary for this time period, but it did feel like a fairly unflinching look at alcoholism. And again, there was almost this weird, like, bizarre appeal of, like, seeing this guy go through this and thinking, like, what would it be like? Just, like... And that is one of the great things about films. You know, I can look at this and wonder, what would it be like to be that dependent and crazed on alcohol? And this film kind of shows me You know, not that I would ever in a million years just decide to become an alcoholic just to experience it, but films show you things that you don't go through yourself, so you can gain a better understanding of just, you know, the larger human experience, I think, which sounds very wanky when you put it like that, but I do believe that. And I really liked Jane Wyman's performance well as Helen. Like, there was just I don't know, she in a film that's so full of, you know, full of cynicism through our main character. You know, he's so just pessimistic about his aspirations as a writer. He's such a defeatist, you know, and she is kind of the opposite of that. And they strike a balance between each other in that sense. The music is really interesting. I can't speak too much to it, but there's this kind of central theme that comes around that reminds me of like Star Trek and like, I don't know, maybe like the Twilight Zone. It's this particular instrument. It's like this woo, like that. I can't really do it, but it felt really like science fiction ish, and it felt really out of place. But that just may be like the reverse effect, where science fiction films took that kind of thing from movies like this. I don't know, but it just, you know, having seen some old sci-fi, it felt very much like and it fell out of place to me, even though again it probably was nothing like that at all at the time when it was released. Yeah, I really like this film. It's one I would watch again, and I love how it brings it back to the bottle hanging out the window, which is such a great, you know, visual cinematic image. You know, you could just show someone a picture of that window with the bottle hanging out of the, you know, on the string, and you can say, what do you think this movie's about? It's about an alcoholic. You know, it tells the story visually before you even get inside that bedroom and start seeing the story unfold and unfurl. And yeah, and I just thought that it was a very well written character with Don, and I again liked the bartender character of Nat. There's another memorable character when he goes to this kind of it's almost like an asylum, but it's this when he really gets down low, he gets taken to this facility, which apparently was like a real facility that they were allowed to film in, which seems like a step of realism that you wouldn't expect from a film back in this period, you know, where it looked like it was just a set, to be honest. But apparently it was this kind of like, you know, they wouldn't let people film in this facility, and for this film they got the chance to do it. But yeah, and I think, you know, it is tricky with a film like this where in more recent years a film about an alcoholic is maybe done with a bit more relatability. Like if you look at a film like Clean and Sober with Michael Keaton, that's a performance that you can look at from the 1980s that feels a bit more modern, and it feels more in line with maybe an experience someone would go through now, even though the 1980s are already horribly outdated at this point in time. But you know, it's just I don't know, the way that people were in the 40s. This is very different. It almost feels like another universe at times. But I do think that core story of addiction is done incredibly well, and you know, it's a nicely shot film. It's got good performances. I do think that maybe his central performance is a little bit overrated. It's a few moments it feels a bit overwrought, but for the most part it's very good, and in a few instances it's actually a great performance as well. And it's yeah, it's a really good film. Is it a film you should see before you die? I'm going to go yes with this one. It's a soft yes, but I do think that to speak to that problem of alcohol addiction and addiction in general, perhaps maybe it might enlighten people who are struggling with other things. It does show you how someone who, I mean, they don't really show you anything of him before that really, but you get the sense that he's a good guy that's just been led astray by his own kind of insecurities, and that's why he drinks, because he can't face the failure that he's anticipating of himself. You know, it's a bit like the George McFly effect. You know, I just don't think I could take that kind of rejection. You know, he doesn't want to fail, so he just wants to drown his sorrows, as they say, the old saying. But yeah, I would say yes, it is a film you should see before you die. Again, now that I'm getting more into the book, and it's taken me a while, we're within spitting distance now of the 10-year anniversary of this whole series. But yeah, now that I'm seeing some of the films that I've covered before and looking at the quality of this, it's like, yeah, it should be classified as a film you should see before you die. I think it's a damn good film, and could, for its story, not help people, but, you know, again, enlighten and kind of just show you a different part of how people deal with their problems. And the way he does is a very destructive way. And so it shows you how far down that can go. And again, I'm just completely repeating myself, but obviously in more modern films, you could probably do that maybe a bit better in a way that a modern audience could be even more impacted by. But I still think that there is a resonance in this film that will pretty much hold itself well, you know, indefinitely. I think people could watch this film in another 50 years and kind of get the problem he's going through and get wrapped up in the story and kind of, you know, root for him to do the right thing. You know, and there's really great lines in the film that I don't want to spoil, you know, that really speak to that. So there's some really great dialogue as well, and I just think that it's a film we don't really hear much about, but I would definitely recommend it. And I would, yeah, again, give a soft yes that it probably is a film you should see before you die. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.